Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this session on basic and translation research for medical trainees. This is a session being organized by Nishta Research Council. We have been doing monthly webinars to build, create more awareness and build some capacity building for medical student trainees in Pakistan, especially Nishta. And we would like to thank, our Nishta alumni in North America, our president, Dr. Sadiq Naveed, for giving us this platform. So this is under Nishta Research Council, which I am chair. I'm Mohammad Zishan. I'm assistant professor of psychiatry in New Jersey. And then my co-chair is Dr. Arbaz bin Riaz, who is also been very accomplished researcher. So today, our speaker is Dr. Soban Umar, who's MD, PhD. He's an associate professor and associate residency program director, Department of Anaesthesiology and Perioperative Medicine, a division of molecular medicine, University of California, Los Angeles. So we are really grateful for Dr. Umar for giving us time on the weekend and also sharing his expertise. And just some housekeeping rules. So we are recording this session and we will share on our Nishta Research Council YouTube channel. I will request the participant to keep themselves mute. If you have any question, I think Dr. Umar graciously agreed to, even if something is not clear, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat, your question, and I will ask Dr. Umar right there and then. But yeah, please mute yourself so that you can continue our presentation smoothly. And I'm really thankful for all of you who are joining us on this weekend. And now I would like to invite Dr. Soban Umar to start sharing, his experience, his thoughts, and and what we can do as a trainee to learn about basic and translation research. Thank you, Dr. Umar.
Shukriya, Zishan. Thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to actually speak here. I'm really thankful to the NRC and the leadership of the Nishta alumni, Dr. Sadiq Naveed, and the NRC co-chairs, Zishan and Arbaz. I think it's a great initiative, and today's topic is just one of the initial topics that I think we'll discuss to give introduction primers to our trainees. It's geared towards Nishta residents, fellows, and medical students, but whoever is watching it on YouTube or wherever on any social media platform, I try to keep it very broad in a way so that people can relate to the journey and how we can actually get involved with basic or translation research being a medical trainee. So as Zishan said, I'm at UCLA, graduated from Nishta. I was from 1997 to 2002 class, and then moved on to do a PhD, a postdoc, and then anesthesia residency, and then I became faculty in 2016. So I'll just give you a brief rundown on our content outline so everyone knows what we are discussing. And so basically, there are 6 topics that I want to touch upon today, and maybe at a later date, we can discuss more in detail other topics or more in detail some of these topics that I chose. So I'm always interested in knowing what's the current state of research in health sciences in Pakistan or in Multan or wherever you're listening from in Pakistan. So we'll give an overview of that, specifically in the context of basic or translational research, and also a little bit about clinical research. I know Zishan and Arbaz and Sadiq, they have gone over some of the clinical research topics, but I think it's good to just have another overview of what's going on. How can we improve this? We have a new Vice Chancellor in Nishta, so we're all very hopeful that things will start to change even further. Then research for medical trainees specifically. What are the aspects that medical trainees at any level need to know, and how we can help them to start doing some research, getting involved and maximize their time. What is basic science research? And then what is translational research? And what's the connection, the link between the two? Then I'll go over a little bit more in detail about publication and peer review process, because that's a question that keeps on coming back, especially for trainees who want to get publications, abstracts, papers, and put them in their CV, get benefit of these publications. A lot of times they don't know the details of what it takes to get a paper published. And then in the end, importance of research in residency, fellowship, and beyond. So how do we produce physician scientists? So that's kind of where we will stop. So as I mentioned, I just wanted to share my journey. And I saw that in a couple of webinars before, our fellow Nishtarians also shared their journey. And I think that's really, really important. I think one take-home message from this talk should be where I grew up, where I went to medical school, and how did I end up here today. So you already know my affiliation, and then feel free to contact me, email me. I mean, I get emails from pretty much everywhere in the world. If you have questions, please feel free to email me or anybody else on this forum, and we'll give you all the details of that. So I'm a PhD mentor for molecular cellular integrative physiology MCIP program at UCLA. So what does that mean? That means I have PhD students training in my lab, and when they finish their PhD, then they can go on and have a career in research. In addition, I have postdoctoral fellows, so people who have done their PhDs and now they're doing postdoctoral fellowship, and then they'll go on and serve as faculty or go work in like biomedical industry or pharma. And then I'm also part of the UCLA cardiovascular team because my research is cardiovascular related. I am an anesthesiologist. Now, one big confusion in Pakistan is that how can you be an anesthesiologist and be doing cardiovascular research, right? So we'll discuss that. And then my journey here briefly, MBBS from Nishtar, as I said, 2002. Fortunately, luckily, I was a gold medalist, so first in my class. So hopefully my name is still there on the board. PhD from Leiden University in the Netherlands, and that was kind of what changed my career path, getting a research degree, and we'll talk about that also for trainees who are probably interested in doing a master's, MPhil, or PhD, and then postdoctoral fellowship to kind of consolidate my PhD credentials, and looking for basically becoming a PI after I had finished my residency training in anesthesiology. And anesthesiology residency in the US is 4 years. Internal medicine is 3 years, anesthesiology is 4 years. And immediately after that, I became faculty at the same place at UCLA, and I got my own lab and NIH funding and all that stuff. All right. So this is where it started, right? So there are memes going around how it started and how it is, but I'm gonna give you a rosy picture that this is the quadrangle of Nishtar, right? We're all very familiar with that. We have paced these hallways for years, and you can still come from there and get to where I am right now. But the journey, I think that's important. You need to relate to the journey and see that there is no shortcut. If I had a shortcut, I would probably refuse it, because I think taking the longer route especially for MD PhDs and also having a postdoc is probably better in the long run, because then you can skip a lot of steps in promotion and other things. Zishan and Sadiq will agree with that. Once you have a research portfolio, you can actually get promoted very quickly in academia. And hopefully that's a topic that we have already discussed or we will discuss. Like what's the big, why do we have to do years and years of research, right? In the US, MD PhD takes like 10 years, 8 to 10 years. But then in the end, these are the people who end up becoming professors faster than the others who just did an MD. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just to tell the students that doing research, scholarly activity, and then being involved in teaching actually helps you get promoted faster. So this is where it started. Beautiful Nishtar quadrangle, right? However, there were no basic science labs. I mean, if you call biochemistry lab that we were going to do research in on milk, right? Milk composition or something, that's not a basic science lab where students were allowed to basically have a hypothesis based research and have mentorship. Although I understand that now things have changed a little bit and there are like a lot more faculty in basic science divisions who have PhDs and MPhil masters. So that's something that's out of our control, but hopefully if the new Vice Chancellor Rana Saab is watching it, I think he needs to make sure that there are appropriate mentors, and we'll talk about the importance of mentorship. Then I moved on to Europe. That's the Leiden University Medical Center, one of the oldest universities in the Netherlands. And this is the hospital. This is the hospital center. So all the research was done here. There were other research centers as well, but my research was in cardiovascular. So I was on the 5th floor of this building, 4th and 5th floor, in a lab, in a basic lab. How did I look like? All those years ago, this is a picture. So as I said, there are no shortcuts, and you have to go through the grind, right? So years and years of research, kind of like basically you get your PhD after going through all these years of hardships. Anyways, but at the end of the tunnel, there was some light. Did a postdoc, moved to Los Angeles, and then got into a highly competitive residency program. And that's what research does. If you have good publications, good abstracts, good understanding of disease mechanisms, good CV, basically, you can end up in highly competitive residency programs. But not everybody is going to do a PhD, right? So not everybody has a dual degree, master's or MPhil. So we will discuss what the regular candidates without a research degree can do to improve their understanding of research and their CV to apply for competitive residencies and fellowships. All right, let's talk about some of the ground realities. I understand that the PMDC was dissolved, or at least I've heard about that. A couple months ago, I was doing a search and I could still find like a website. I was basically looking for statistics. I was looking for numbers. How many medical colleges are there? How many universities are there, medical universities in Pakistan? So I'm just going to share some numbers. I'm sure these numbers may have already updated in the last couple of months. However, I just wanted to see how many public universities are there. So for example, here we see 59 total public universities, 44 medical, 15 dental, and then private. There is an explosion of private universities. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Time will tell, but there are so many private universities. I remember when we graduated, there were only 8 medical colleges in Punjab, and the merit and everything was made based on that. And but now look at this. There's like more than 200 total, like public plus private institutions. And a lot of them have become universities, right? So, but university is degree awarding institution and should have a research infrastructure. That's where we're going with this. All right, these are some of the list of universities of Pakistan, and these are medical or dental universities, right? So I'm not gonna take all these names, but there are a lot of these universities, and I think Nishtar University is also like one of them. So all this information I was able to find on their website, and basically there are plenty. Now, all these is still going on, right? So all these universities, but what are their rankings? Where do they rank? Are they giving quality education? Are they giving the opportunities to our trainees for research, for quality improvement, for education? That's what is required in countries like the US, or even in Pakistan. Aga Khan University has high standard. But what about Nishtar? Why Nishtarian medical students can't have the same quality of education? Because the patient population is there. For learning, you get the best education in clinical learning and clinical education. However, what about the research, and what about the education? So Aga Khan University was ranked #2 best university in Pakistan, number 545 in best global universities. So that's actually not bad to be in the top 600 in the world. So, and #2 in Pakistan. And then looking at some of these metrics, World University Rankings 2021, the higher education World University Ranking. So there are many rankings. I mean, you can look at different ones and see where Pakistani universities, especially medical universities, are ranked. These are general, by the way, because in the top 500, I couldn't find any medical university, but there are others, Quaid-e-Azam University, ComSats, from like 500 to 800. And then there are others. The list keeps on going, but they're not in the top 500. However, there are support to have some sort of biomedical research, molecular biology research, biochemistry research, physiology research ongoing. Now, why can't students from our medical colleges do research on these campuses, especially like BZU, that's in the same city? If mentorship is not available in Nishtar, if there are no PhD mentors, why can't students from Nishtar University actually collaborate and find mentorship at BZU? So that's something that years ago, there were some, I had some experiences that can be done, because here in the West, finding mentorship, again, is hard, but in the same city, if let's say I'm at UCLA, if some trainee of mine says that I want to have a mentor at USC, just in downtown Los Angeles, it's possible, it's doable. You just have a long-term relationship with your mentor, and you make it happen. And in this day and age, it is doable. So let's see what are the obstacles for finding mentorship. So I'm just going to go over some of these topics that are important for particularly research for medical trainees, and keeping in mind the situation in Pakistan or Nishtar overall. So the first point is integration of research in medical education curriculum. So we know that clinically we train our trainees very well, right? So we are prime examples. We graduated from Nishtar. You don't have to be a gold medalist. Any good, well-trained trainee from Nishtar or anywhere else in Pakistan can actually do very well, and they have done very well over decades in the US and UK and wherever, you name it. So that's not an issue. Clinical training is probably not an issue. Of course, the standards have to go up. Everything has to be basically brought to the same level as elsewhere. However, the problem is integration of research in medical education curriculum, specifically basic science and translational and clinical research. Clinical research still, I think there is some research ongoing. People write case reports, or there are some clinical trials even. I know UHS and Aga Khan, I mean, some of these, or Army Medical Institutes, I think they're doing good research. They have labs, they have trainees. However, are MBBS applicants, are they allowed, or do they know that they could actually gain some research experience there? If there are some trainees who have, please write in the comments. If there are trainees who have found mentorship in some of these biomedical institutes in other universities, other than their medical colleges or medical universities, please write to us. I'm interested in knowing that. What I have understood is that the MPhil or master's students, actually, they have research lab access in those institutions. So how do we integrate research in our curriculum? Well, the important thing is, first, we have to teach how to do research to our trainees in MBBS. Not sure how much of that is being done. 20 years ago, there was not much. There were only a couple of people on campus who would do some research, and that was not very basic in nature. Was it translational? Not so sure. Clinical research, however, as I said, has been done, has been ongoing, but of course there has to be like some regulatory authority oversight, as well as infrastructure needs to be implemented. So medical students, when they join as first-year medical student, they should already know who to contact. There should be a liaison in the medical school I heard recently the new vice chancellor appointed somebody who is going to coordinate the medical education, hopefully some research also for trainees. So that's really important. They should know I have a research block coming up. People who have research interests should get some time to do some research and mentorship. So that's my next point. Research mentorship lab space. Are there labs in our medical college, let's say in Nishtar, where I graduated from? I know that physiology, biochemistry, anatomy, they all have labs where they used to keep specimens, right? They used to show us, which is great. They used to show us in histology, we used to look at all the different slides from different organs, human organs. So that's part of the education, histology and anatomy lectures. However, can somebody find mentorship and do a project where they induce some changes in a cell culture model or an animal model? And these things are not very expensive to do. Honestly, if you look around in the neighborhood in around Pakistan, even in Pakistan, I mentioned some of these institutions, they are doing animal research. So how much of that is being done in Nishtar, I'm not sure. Please write to us if you know somebody, a PI who's actively doing research and has some grant funding, grant support. So research mentorship is important. And these mentors will actually hold your hand and take you further, train you in research methodology. That's our next point. They will train you how to do some of these, how to learn some of these techniques and how to basically synthesize a hypothesis, how to write a project proposal, and how to write abstracts and papers. So where to start? You start from the basics, right? So you need a mentor, somebody who has done a master's or an MPhil or a PhD. In basic sciences and physiology, biochemistry, anatomy, there should be, or public health or community medicine, there should be people who hold these degrees. That should be a requirement to basically be at least one or two people in the department, these departments, to have these degrees. And maybe another day we'll talk about like how can clinical professors here have PhDs as well. I'm an anesthesiologist, but I have a basic science PhD. How do I combine that? So that's a topic for another time. Scientific writing. I think you had a webinar, if I understand, on scientific writing, how to write case reports, how to write review articles, how to write a good abstract, right? These are the questions we keep on receiving from trainees, but they have no prior experience. They are fifth year MBBS students, never written an abstract. So that needs to change. Basics of data collection, storage, analysis, and biostatistics. That's another point. A lot of times trainees don't know basic biostatistics. What is a mean? What is an average? What is a standard deviation? What is a p-value, right? So mean, median, mode, all those things. They do study those for exams, but they don't know how to work in Excel. They don't know how to use SPSS or GraphPad Prism or whatever you name it. So basics of data collection. What is a responsible conduct in research, right? So how do you store your data responsibly? Metrics for quality of research. We can have another lecture on this. Where do you publish? I think I'm going to go in detail about publication and peer review process in this talk, because that's important. A lot of you get these predatory journal emails. I get those every day, multiple times a day. You just delete them. This is like already the trainees, medical trainees have so much on their plate, and then getting these kind of emails and trying to figure out, is this real or is this just a predatory journal? That's confusing. So don't publish, don't even send your work to some of these journals who are there just to make money and basically trap a lot of people and busy people like doctors and nurses and others. So that's important, how to publish your work in a high impact journal. Teamwork and collaboration in research. You don't do everything. There has to be a team. Research is teamwork, like clinical practice is a teamwork. Of course, sometimes you see your patients yourself in a clinic. However, you still have a team, right? You have nurses, you have techs, you have people on the front desk. So it's a teamwork, and collaborators are important. So you have to learn how to work in a team. Effective presentation of research findings. How do you present your findings at conferences? Right? That's something that students at the level of undergrad and even medical students, they should know how to present. At campus, there should be research symposia, there should be conferences. I don't know if there is like a Nishtar, annual Nishtar research day or something. Here on campus at UCLA, everywhere else, there are research days where there's poster competition, oral presentations, how to integrate research in a clinical career and how to build a research career. How can you be a researcher and a physician? It's called a physician scientist, right? It's not a new term. All these old scientists from the previous centuries that we talk about, they were all physician scientists. They just didn't do one thing. They were also like researchers. Some of them were also like physicists and a physician, right? So all these Al-Haytham and Al-Birunis and all these Ibn Sina, they were physician scientists. So what happened now? Why are we only producing physicians? I mean, great physicians. However, why can't they do research? Why their bandwidth is so short? They were all trained in the same geographical area. So what's going on now? Why can't we produce some of these good physician scientists? Or what happens when these physicians from, let's say, Nishtar go out in other countries and then they become successful physician scientists? So I think the fundamental thing is lack of mentorship, lack of infrastructure. All right, this is kind of the crux of the talk. So this is the take-home message as well. What is basic science research and what is clinical research, and where does translational research sit in that? So if you were to understand one principle is basically described here on this slide. So basic research starts at the bench, right? So I just showed you my bench when I was a PhD student. That's where all the discoveries happen. That's where the COVID-19 vaccine was developed. That's where all the different drugs that we end up using in clinical trials, they are produced, they're tested, right? All the in vivo or in the animal models, in vitro or in cell culture studies, or ex vivo whole organ studies are performed. We need these animal scientists. We need these basic research scientists. Now, why can't they be MDs or MDs with PhDs or master's degree? That's a question for us. Why aren't we producing basic research scientists who also happen to be MDs? Because their understanding will be a lot better about disease mechanisms because they see the patients, they can connect the dots. And then clinical research, I know there are other webinars planned and already they have been conducted about clinical research, the importance of clinical research. How do we connect the basic and the clinical research? It's basically the fundamental concept is bench to bedside. We have excellent bedside manners. We have excellent bedside training. Coming from Nishtar, we used to learn pretty much everything at the bedside. Of course, we were like studying a lot of books, which is kind of obsolete here, but the bedside education kind of was predominant in years 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, and we knew how to see a patient. And even in this day and age where residents or medical students, they just look at the chart, the electronic health record, and just tell you that present you a patient without seeing a patient here. We are pretty good in that part of the world in producing physicians who actually know how to see a patient, and they're not completely reliant on CAT scans and all the different fancy scans that are out there, or blood tests, and of course they're helpful, but you first have to see the patient. Now, clinical research entails clinical trials, epidemiologic studies, and others, but the discoveries are made in the basic science space, at the bench, and then they move to the bedside. And then I kept this arrow both ways. So, and then whatever we find in the clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, that goes back to the basic science lab to kind of modify if there are side effects of a therapy, or kind of fine tune the discoveries or the results that we get from these clinical studies, how we go back and look at our data or do more experiments. So these are very well connected. Why can't we connect these dots in our medical universities, medical institutions? That's the question. I'm just going to pose that question. Because if you see here, of course, clinical research is important. However, what about the basic science and translational aspect? why can't the same physicians, with the help of scientists, PhD scientists and MD PhDs at the same institution, carry out this very effectively? All right, let's talk about basic science research for a little bit. So as I said, most of it is laboratory-based research. And these laboratories typically are either in the hospital where the patients are seen or the clinicians work, or close by. Typically in the West, there are labs that are either in the same building or just across the street. So even physically, there is less distance and people can actually walk to the labs and take their samples and stuff. All right. But how do we perform laboratory-based research? We talked about mentorship, right? So again, I'll put that as a first thing. In any kind of research, you need a mentor. You cannot start without a mentor. Hypothesis generating research, you have to have a hypothesis most of the times, unless you're like doing an exploratory study, or in other words, here we call it fishing expedition. Those are also important. However, hypothesis is important. What is your hypothesis? And that's how you start building on your project or your proposal. And then you need the tools to carry out this research. So learning research methodology, in vivo, in vitro, ex vivo. So there are different models that you can work with. Now, not all of these are super expensive. You can actually perform these experiments without a lot of funding, research funding. So that argument that, oh, in Nishtha, in Pakistan, we cannot do these types of research because it's highly fancy. No, we're not talking about like very expensive single cell sequencing or like spatial transcriptomics and whatever. These are simple research methodology. And this can be done, this can be learned. At least teach our trainees, so when they go elsewhere, their CV is stronger, they can actually start working right away. They can say that I have gained some experience in microscopy, I've gained some experience in sample collection and making RNA or protein, isolating RNA protein, or running a Western, or running a PCR. And these are skill sets. They all go in your CV. Do you have these skill sets? A lot of people email us applying for research positions. However, they don't have any such experiences. Now, it goes back to medical school, why these skill sets are not taught. It doesn't take very long. And if they're an organized program, these things can be taught. Again, mentorship, I'll keep on repeating mentorship again and again. Who were your mentors? Who taught you? What were their credentials? Scientific writing. Have you written an abstract? How to write a good abstract? We can cover that in some of these webinars if we haven't. I know review article and case reports, they have been covered. And meta-analysis, of course. Data collection, storage, analysis, and biostats. We've talked about this. Again, in basic science, you need all of that. And being organized. Effective presentation of research findings. Again, it's like how you present your data. Have you presented it to your own colleagues or at local level, at the campus, then at the city level or regional level, national level, and then international level? So there are conferences everywhere. I see a lot of times there are physicians from Pakistan in a lot of these big conferences, American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, American Thoracic Society. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of presentations. They're there as visitors. Why can't we present research? There are so many cases, there are so many complicated surgeries, patients. Why can't we put that together? I'm not even talking about basic science research. Why can't we look at biomarkers? Why can't we look at histologic changes in different cancers that are prevalent in a particular region of Pakistan? So this is how the bench looks like, right? This is a research lab. Now, it doesn't have to be very fancy. You can create a small lab in a corner in Nishtha somewhere. You just need to dedicate that space. You just need a computer or two. I know there's a computer lab. I think the North American Association, the Nishtha Association, has been very helpful in developing infrastructure. But the mentorship, the people are going to be from the local infrastructure, and then the mentorship, the time commitment is going to come from the faculty. Faculty development can be done. However, there needs to be some space allocation. There needs to be some reagents, some salts, some chemicals, some basic, very simple organic solvents that are present in biochemistry labs and in other campuses. Why can't we have those? So you need some lab space. Some techniques, some examples, right? So I know for sure a lot of universities have these. I visited the University of Health Sciences. They have these. They have the Western blot apparatus. These are not very expensive. You can teach these students how to do a PCR, how to run a blot, Western blot, how to make your own blot, how to run these gels. That's not that difficult. And what is translational research? So from the previous slide, we saw that translational research is kind of the interface between basic science research and clinical research. It is very important. Now, if your argument is that we don't have infrastructure for basic science research in a place like Nishtar or in Pakistan in medical schools, how about translational research? We can still do biomarker research. We can still have serum or plasma collected from patients. How much does that take? And you can actually look at biomarkers from those patients. And then vaccine development, that's very ripe in these days and during the pandemic. We're really behind in that. Diagnostics and therapeutics, data collection, of course, storage analysis, that applies to everything, research methodology, how to collect tissue from the operating rooms, how to collect blood samples from the clinics or in the pre-op area or in the ICU. And what's the clinical relevance of basic science research? So that's a connection. So if you find something, a basic science question, you can prove that by looking at some translational question in terms of like human samples, biobanking, histopathologic analysis of human samples. I remember in Ishtar, we have a lot of human samples. However, that can be done prospectively. If a student is interested, they just need a liquid nitrogen flask and they can collect these tissues in a freezer, in a -80 freezer. And then that can be used for different biomarkers, tissue or plasma biomarker studies. These are much easier than, let's say, doing like an animal model study or cell culture study. Here you have the sample. A lot of these private labs actually do these. The CA125, all these different markers of cancer, you just have to have a good question. How do you synthesize your question? For that, you need mentorship. For that, you need direction. So that's translation research. Whatever you find from the animal models, you take it to the humans, you find the connection, and then you design clinical trials or epidemiologic studies. So these studies are doable, but again, you need mentorship. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper into publication and peer review process. How to choose a journal, what are the journal impact factors, what are predatory journals, how to submit a paper, and what are the authorship criteria, how to respond to reviewer comments once the paper undergoes revision, and what is a non-peer reviewed publication. So one by one, how to choose a journal to publish. So you have to look at scope and relevance to the conducted research, like basic, clinical, translation. There are journals for each one of these. Some of them will publish both or all three of them. However, there are some that will only be publishing clinical research or only basic science research. Now there are even the translation research journals. So you have to choose based on your research and based on the scope of the relevance of the study to the journal. And then quality and prestige. What is the journal impact factor, right? So don't send your work, your hard-earned data to a journal that doesn't even have an impact factor. A lot of the Pakistani journals don't have an impact factor, and that's related to readership, citations, etc. But if you have good enough work, if you have good mentorship, you have collaborators who can look at your work and give you an advice that you can send it to a little bit higher impact journal or an international journal. That will help you with your CV, with your career and everything. Average time to first decision. You don't want to send your paper to somewhere where it takes like months and months of time and they're so slow and unprofessional that you don't get your first decision quickly. You have to move on and submit it elsewhere. Of course, you want to make changes before you resubmit based on the comments that you receive from the reviewers or the editor. Publication charges and open access. So that's something that is newer. A lot of journals are becoming open access, and they require thousands and thousands of dollars, which is even for us here is very expensive. So you need to find a journal that is willing to publish your paper without charging you a lot of money. So there are still some journals who will, if you're early career or if you're a student trainee, they will have either discounts, or some of them don't have any publication charges, or they'll charge you only for color figures, etc. So that's another important factor. And if you have a mentor who has some funding, they can cover this. So trainees should not worry about this thing. And these are some of the examples how you can find it. There are different ways to do it. I normally Google it, and then I find like different indices that give me the different impact factors, their citations in the last couple of years, which country they belong to. Journal American College of Cardiology, for example, Circulation. These are cardiology, cardiovascular related journals, and they have their ranking. So choose wisely. And then impact factors are calculated yearly for journals listed in the Journal Citation Report, JCR. And then impact factors are calculated by Clarivate that reflect the yearly average number of citations that the articles published in the last 2 years in a given journal. And now there is like altmetric index, there are hits like social media hits. So a lot of journals are keeping track of how many times was this article accessed. So you need to be smart about those things, and you can put them in your CV as well if your article has a high or had a high altmetric score at some point. And these are some other journal impact factors. For example, cardiovascular, American Heart Association related journals are listed here. This is like Home Critical Care Journal. And then on their main webpage, you can find these kind of information like general metrics. You don't have to dig deeper. What are predatory journals? So these are journals that will send you an email, and the language will be funny, right? I find it funny. They'll address you as Professor so-and-so with your first name, and then copy paste and different colors, different fonts. Yeah, don't fall for these. These are basically, a lot of them probably don't even exist, or they're just there for they're wolves that are looking for your money. So don't even do that. A lot of journals never send you an email to solicit articles unless you're really famous and stuff. So don't even think about those journals. Talk to somebody senior, talk to your mentor, and they'll help you find a journal to publish. And these are just some examples, definition of predatory journals, and they have just bad practices, and they accept articles for publication along with author's fee without performing promised quality checks, which is bad for you. If your paper gets published with typos and grammatical mistake, that's really bad. That stays on forever on World Wide Web, and plagiarism is not checked. Ethical approvals are not checked. So that's bad. Don't do that. How to submit a paper. So there are online submission and tracking systems. There's a cover letter you have to write about the highlights of your study to the editor-in-chief. Journal article format requirements, that takes a lot of time whenever you have to submit paper from one journal to the other after a rejection. So you have to kind of mold everything based on their requirements. Reference style, that's another pain. Recommended or blocked reviewers. So you can actually recommend somebody who's famous and you think that they can be a good reviewer for this work, or you can block reviewers if you think there are perceived conflict of interest. And then authorship criteria. So that's kind of an ethical question, like who gets to become an author? We receive a lot of time requests that, hey, can I be added to one of your papers? But not without doing the work that is according to these criteria. So it's unethical. You shouldn't be asking those questions without doing the work. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, basically ethical standards warrant that every author should have contributed to the work, and they should have approved the final manuscript. How to respond to reviewer comments. So it's a time-sensitive process. They'll give you 90 days or 60 days or 30 days. So you don't have a lot of time. If it's basic science research or translation, you have to perform some experiments. Major and minor comments. So of course, major comments are important. You definitely have to take care of most of them. Minor comments are usually grammatical or typographical errors. And you have to prepare a point-by-point rebuttal letter. So again, your mentor will help you for the first time when you're doing this, but you have to satisfy the reviewers. Then manuscript with track changes are highlighted with new text. You have to tell the reviewers where the changes were made. It will make their life easier. And then what is a non-peer-reviewed publication or journal? So there's like medRxiv, bioRxiv. These are some of the popular non-peer-reviewed platforms that became really popular at the beginning of this pandemic. However, I've seen there is a lot of cynicism. There's a lot of a lot of people think that it's not a good practice because there's literally no peer review. These papers get published on these platforms and social media, and the common public actually thinks that this is well vetted and peer reviewed, so they start to kind of follow the advice, and so it can be dangerous as well. But I see the point that some discoveries, when they're made, authors don't want to keep them from being published, so they want to put them on the World Wide Web. A lot of these papers actually get published in the peer-reviewed journals, but peer review is important. It's imperative, it's paramount. You shouldn't only go by, you cannot cite a lot of these studies that haven't been peer-reviewed. And the last topic for today is the importance of research in residency, fellowship, and beyond. So we briefly talked about integrating research in medical education curriculum. So that, for me, is the key. Because if you don't have research-related lectures, right? So nobody's teaching you biostatistics or ethical conduct of research or research methodology, whether it's some basic research or clinical research or translational research, how can you even expect trainees, MBBS or FCPS trainees or MCPS trainees to actually integrate research in their education? It's not their job. It has to be inside the training curriculum. So I'm an associate program director at UCLA Anaesthesiology residency. It's a clinical residency. However, I take care of the research tracks and research for these trainees and the medical students, of course, who are interested in anesthesia. So it has to be integrated. We have to give these people extra weeks or extra months of research time. And at the same time, we want to make sure they're not missing out on their clinical rotation. They're still doing their expected number of cases. So there is some work to be done by the faculty members. So that requires good coordination at the leadership level. Then concept of dedicated or protected research time. So the dedicated time is for medical students, trainees, residents, fellows, that they know that I am on research week. This week, I'm not expected to see patients or perform procedures. Nobody can call me, nobody can page me. I am doing my research. And of course, then you can hold them responsible if they're not productive. And then protected research time is mostly for faculty. Also, you can say for fellows who have to have some protected time again, where they're not being paged. They're not being called to do a case or something or see patients, because they are doing their protected research or protected education. They're preparing lectures. So that concept needs to be developed in the system in Pakistan or in Nishtar. Development of physician scientists. So as I said earlier, where are all the physician scientists? Why are we not producing physician scientists? Now, you don't have to have an extra degree of research. However, it's preferred. Then you will feel that you'll have the tools, you have the knowledge, you have the degree to tackle all these issues that we have posed in this talk. Still, you can be an MBBS or MD and still have significant research experience. You just need to get that experience either during or after your medical degree. And what does it do for trainees? They have better understanding of disease mechanisms. Once you start doing research, you understand the diseases better. It helps to make you a better clinician as well, because then your questions will be very scientifically justified and based. So it's both ways. And then lastly, how to integrate your research in a clinical career and how to build a research career. As I said, I started this webinar with that if you have research credentials as a clinician, you will move faster, you'll get promoted faster. And why is that? Because you, in the end, become a mentor, you become a teacher, you are highly productive, you have a higher H index, you have higher citations, you will be invited to give talks, you will be invited to give lectures, you'll go to conferences, and that all is part of academic medicine. So maybe another day we can talk about academic medicine or academic practice versus private practice. These are different routes. But in Pakistan, medical universities are academic institutions. They are expected to have all these aspects that we are discussing. With that, I'm just going to stop here, and then let's see if there are any questions. Zishan, thank you for moderating, and I'm happy to take any questions there may be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soban, for giving, very in a simple way, elaborating step by step, and helping us differentiate, the basic translational clinical research. Very helpful. So really appreciate that. So we have one hand raised from Hassan Wajid. Hassan, please unmute yourself and please ask your question from Dr. Soban directly.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Soban. That was an excellent presentation, and I really appreciate your time. Like, you raised some great questions that I see around me most of the times. A brief introduction to myself. I'm an intern at Mayo Hospital, Lahore, and I'm a graduate of King Edward Medical College. So one of the more common problems that I see around my colleagues, especially those fellows working in specialties like internal medicine and pediatrics medicine, is that they say they have a lot of burden and there are a lot of working hours. Per week, the working hours often exceed 60 hours. And they are where does the research fit in all that? Because even I wanted to write a simple case report and I couldn't even find a single person who can even help me with that. How do I cope that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Hassan. That's a very, very valid question. So I can give you my example. When I was in residency, my hours were, as an intern, sometimes were 80, sometimes 70, right, per week. And then anesthesia is very busy, and of course at a tertiary care hospital in a big city like Los Angeles, it's very busy. So 55, 60 hours, 65 hours, that was the average. But then the key here is getting protected research time. Now, as sometimes you don't have that luxury, right, as you are describing. And of course, trainees are tired, they have a lot of clinical burden. Now, that's where this has to be formally kind of structured. The residency programs, the medical school in charge of whoever is your medical education and research in charge, they need to incorporate that when you are doing your medical school rotations, or there should be like a research presentation. They should expect that, okay, if this person is doing the research presentation, someone else need to see the patient or take the call. In residency, it's the hardest, because if you miss a rotation or if you miss one day, then it's on your co-interns or co-residents. But that's the sacrifice that the training programs have to make. They have to find place for research-minded individuals. So that's the structured solution, and hopefully with time that will change. Hopefully with better leadership and more awareness, right? More of these webinars will help kind of create that awareness that we cannot continue doing this, right? We are not producing the physician scientists that we deserve, the country deserves. So for that, what my advice is, continue doing what you're doing. Again, you can have mentorship either locally or remotely. Writing case reports, luckily, doesn't involve a lot of groundwork. You don't need a lab. You don't need to collect samples. You just need good mentorship so that you're doing things right. So, and that's really important. That's the scientific discourse. I think there was a nice webinar on how to write case reports and review articles. So feel free to contact anybody from this forum, NRC, or anybody from any of your let's say KMU
Yes.
alumni, and I'm sure they'll be happy.
Thank you,
to,
doctor. That makes perfect sense. Perfect.
Yeah, they'll be happy to help you out with Zoom and everything with these webinars. I think the world has become smaller, and I hear you, and that's a problem of a lot of people. I think it's a common shared problem that trainees are very tired and they're working extra hours, COVID, everything considered. So that's a genuine concern.
Thank you, Dr. Soban. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Hassan, and thank you, Dr. Soban, for answering. Okay, the question is, where will this webinar be posted? Were the previous webinar posted? So we are posting on Nishtar Research Council YouTube channel. We have posted previous webinars, and we will post this in a day or two on our Nishtar Research Council YouTube channel.
And then, Zishan, I think to make it more interactive, if they're watching the video on YouTube, please leave comments underneath. Nice comments, not abuse or something. Just leave some constructive comments and let's make it interactive. And if you guys are not on Twitter, Zishan, I highly recommend making a Twitter account for NRC. And we're not limited to Nishtarians, right? So we are here, I mean, we interact with all graduates from everywhere. And so we'll make like a NRC Twitter account and leave us messages, or we can have topics, we can have journal club, whatever. So this is work in progress. And if you guys want to have like discussions, we can have it brief. We don't have to have 1 hour discussions. We can have like very quick 10, 15 minute, 30-minute sessions on Twitter, and people can basically quickly post a comment and we can answer them there, or YouTube, whatever works for you. Are there any other questions?
And Soban, what have you seen, coming from Nishtar background and then, mashallah, doing that much success in research? What have you seen, the common success stories, who have people who have similar background with not a lot of research, but they succeed with all those barriers that commonly people may think, a lot of clinical work, I don't have much experience, I don't have, much platform. So any thoughts or suggestions on that?
Yeah, so it's really hard when you're doing clinical work to actually be in a lab at the same time or be collecting tissue samples, because you're supposed to be in charge of like a unit, or you're like running a unit, or so that's really difficult, right? That was the question from Hassan Wajid, that how are you supposed to be at two places at the same time if you're trying to do like research or collect samples, or so that's hard. It's very difficult. I have worked post-call days to collect samples or tissue, but that's literally based on who you are, if you can manage. I will not recommend that. I don't want you to burn out. And so that's where I think getting protected time is important. Now, going back to the basics, how did I learn? So when I graduated, I had zero experience of any basic or clinical or translational research. We did some like reports and stuff, but nothing hardcore what I'm doing right now. So I had to start from the basics. Don't be shy to learn from technicians if you're in a lab. Don't be shy to learn from master students. You're an MD, so you think that I know more or whatever, like, but you have to learn from the basics. And if you start there, like pipetting, cutting tissue sections, doing some staining, simple things, and then you move on to more complicated stuff, working with RNA, working with protein, right? Running gels, running PCRs, running in vivo animal models, doing in vitro studies, gene knockouts and gene therapy, right? So it's all doable. Even if it was not taught during medical school, you can still you can learn it. Now, a lot of people may not do master's, MPhil, or PhD. However, if they take a year off, if they're shadowing or observing somewhere, and then they can also work in a lab. So that way they have to divide their time, part-time doing some research, part-time doing some clinical shadowing or observership, because you also have to keep in mind, you have to improve your CV, get to that residency spot that you're looking for. But what I'm talking about, what we talked about today, is that you can actually take a couple of years out of your budding clinical career, get yourself trained to do some meaningful research, go back to the clinics. You never lose. I mean, it's like riding a bicycle. You don't lose your clinical skills. And then you will see how fast you will grow, right? Because you have been trained now in clinical space and then research space. Formal training, there is no alternative to getting formally trained. So that's a bottom line. Even if you don't want a degree, if you don't have time, if you think you're getting older, or I don't know, if you don't want to lose some years, or financially if you're not stable, or anything, you just need to make sure you get some training and have a skill set. Because showing up at a lab saying that I have zero experience may not work in a lot of labs. So you have to have some basic skills. That I have made some solutions. I know how to dissociate cells, or I know how to basically do some simple housekeeping in a lab situation, or I've collected sample. I have experience of recruiting patients for a trial or something. So, but that can be done as a medical student. You have 5 years, and knowing, I mean, coming from there, I know there are times, there's some downtime, because for studying for prof, you only pick up books like in the summer, like just what, 2-3 weeks before the prof or something. I don't know, but that's my experience. So there is time. Over here in the West, there are summer internships in the labs. We actually host a lot of students in the summer. So it can be done. The will has to be there.
So there is a question, Soban, from Tosif Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum. Myself, Tosif, from Kashmir background in machine learning, working on mental health analytics in conflict zones, finding difficult to publish papers on conflict mental health. What are your suggestions?
I think Zishan, you'll be a better suited person to talk about these kind of topics, but I can give like a general advice. Who's your mentor? You need to find a mentor, because these kind of things you will navigate very well if you have a mentor. So the importance of mentorship, I think it's becoming a little bit more clear these days in places like Nishtar or in Pakistan overall. We see that in cricket, right? We call them mentors. So mentors are becoming very important now. So mentorship is the key. You cannot do everything yourself. If you don't have mentors, if you don't have teachers, it will be hard. Your topic sounds very interesting. Machine learning is the thing these days. That's a hot topic, and sounds like you have an interesting topic that Zishan will probably be able to help out. He's a leading psychiatry researcher, so I think that's kind of probably linked to that. So Zishan, I'll leave it up to you. How to find a good journal, and based on topic and based on the quality of research and all that.
Yes, I think, no, thank you so much, Soban, for sharing your thoughts. What I would suggest is, as the basic rule is try to find out what have been done on this area, and then try to see what's unique or what has still unexplored, and what is actually something that you are looking into it. So once you find that area, then definitely I think I really like the idea of mentorship. I think there are, as I said, if you go, depending on if you're working mostly on children and adults, American Psychiatric Association, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and there are organizations, that where you can request for formal mentorship, and also share your thoughts to see, who can be, because they know like who are the people who are working on different projects. And also, don't hesitate to share, reach out to our Nishtar Research Council, Facebook page. If you have any question, concern, we will be happy to see, what mentorship we can provide from our platform. But I think just that you're thinking about this idea, and this is definitely, it's important topic, trauma, perception of trauma, that, that has been a lot, its impact globally on children, even in pregnancy. So there are so many ways. It all depends on what you are looking and what things have not done. And we are happy to help in this regard. And then we have Arafat Shabir, who raised his hand. Arafat, please unmute yourself and ask the question directly.
Thanks, Zishan, and thank you, Dr. Soban, for an excellent presentation. And it's actually a very good reality check. There hasn't been any research or anything academic going on as far as the the Pakistan standpoint and the Nishtar standpoint. I'm one of the hospitalists. I recently graduated from the residency. My question would be, if you could please share your briefly, if you could share your path. How did you transition from the residency to a scientist track? Did you do a PhD? Did you do something before the residency, or did you transition during the residency or after the residency? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arafat. Shabir, that's a great question. So actually, earlier in the talk, maybe you missed that. I did mention that, and you can go back, check it on YouTube. But briefly, I'll tell you that it was formal training. So I did MBBS from Nishtar, then a PhD from Europe, and then postdoc from UCLA, then residency from UCLA. So it's a long period. There are no shortcuts. That's what I'm trying to instill in the trainees. If you're looking for shortcuts, I think medicine is not for you. I mean, you may still get to somewhere with a shortcut, but I think it's, especially for being a physician scientist, you have to put in those years and years of training. You don't have to have a formal degree. Not everybody will be an MD, PhD, or master's or MPhil or whatever, but you need to spend some time in research, whether it's clinical, basic, or translational research. You need a mentor, as we are saying. You cannot do it all by yourself, right? There may be exceptions, but you need somebody senior who can guide you through this. Same thing clinically, right? For becoming a surgeon or any clinician, you need mentors. You need mentors. You cannot learn everything by yourself. We all had great teachers, and the reason why we're here is because of those teachers. Those teachers taught us excellent clinical skills that still stay with me, with us, and that's because of Nishtar. Because the kind of workload that we had as house officers there, I still tell my trainees that you don't even want to think about that. Like it's unreal. The OPD, the number of patients that you see there, it's unheard of here. So that's not a question. I think the question is not about, are we ready to take on the clinical burden? Yes, we can, right? Of course, there have to be improvements there, but I'm just addressing like the leadership in medical universities, right? Now they're universities. You're in the world ranking. You're supposed to be. Where do we stand? Why can't we give our trainees that mentorship that they deserve? Why can't we give them the research infrastructure? Do we have institutional review board in all universities? Do we have IRBs in place for some clinical studies, right? If there is more goiter in South Punjab, if there are hematologic conditions in South Punjab, how many studies are registered and enrolled under some sort of governing body for clinical research? Are we doing something? Are we doing some sort of like, I don't know, simple genetic studies? I'm sure there are, but why can't Nishtar take the lead on that? Because we see those patients. We used to see all these patients would leave Rajanpur in a small minivan and arrive at Nishtar doorstep, and you have to take care of them. I had seen patients from Quetta coming to Nishtar. So why can't Nishtar lead the way? It's a tertiary care hospital. We have all these patients. We can collect all these samples. I'm not even talking about basic science research anymore. What about clinical research? I think there's a lot to be done. And then it's very clear, like if the trainees from Nishtar can go abroad and become successful physician scientists, I'm sure that they can also become successful if given the opportunities over there. So I think just it will be stepwise. I think we have great leadership now. We have a new vice chancellor. So if we can have allocated some resources for starting some research, and NRC, I think, has been in touch with all that leadership. So our goal will also be to advise them, to basically help out with these kind of practical things, so the trainees have the information, so trainees are not missing out on the opportunities. So these webinars will help a lot of trainees, not just from Nishtar, but also like other medical universities from Pakistan to learn how the trainees get research exposure during their clinical years in places like US or UK or Australia.
Thank you so much, Soban bhai. I think well explained, and thank you for answering all those questions. So I think almost of, just checking the chat. Yeah, people are asking about how to contact you, LinkedIn, Twitter. So if you can share maybe in the chat, that will be helpful.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat, and then yeah, if they could, if there's something that we didn't answer, I mean, if you leave the comment under the YouTube video and ask other students to subscribe to this channel, I think there will be more content coming up. We can have more webinars, and I mean, it's hard to capture everything in one webinar, so we'll just have series of webinars. If you guys are interested in like practical points of like how to get started, what is pipetting, what is like how to run a gel, or what are things that medical students can do in a lab. So at least you know when you're applying to some laboratory-based position as a research associate, at least you know the terms and at least what it takes to learn those simple techniques.
Yes, yeah, I highly encourage people to subscribe it. We are doing monthly webinars. Our next we are talking to some other experts for our next webinar. We'll keep you posted, and with that note, I would like to thank you again for Dr. Soban Umar for his time on the weekend, and I will also thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Zishan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and good luck.